welcome to the Successful Franchisee's Beautiful View. In this episode, we're going to talk about risk and the 3 intentional actions to reduce the risk for your franchise. I'm Luke Fry, and I owned Image First Franchise for 20 years. And during that time, half of my team was with me for over 15 of those 20 years. During that time, I was also a paid and volunteer firefighter for 19 years, and 11 of those, I was chief of the Terrace Park Fire Department. We grew from 25 members starting in 2007, and when I resigned my position in November 2018, we had 50 members that were unpaid professionals as opposed to volunteers. The purpose of this podcast is very simple. I address the question, why are some franchisees successful and others aren't, even though they're in the same franchise system? This episode is all about risk in your franchise and how to minimize it, setting up systems in order to identify and also to minimize the effects of the different types of risk. There's basically 3 general types of risk. There's preventable risk, and that is minimized with internal controls such as checklists on who cleaned the bathroom last. Your missions and your values also play an important role in minimizing the preventable risk in your franchise. They keep the staff and keep your employees directed. And with the proper supervision, they're all going in the same direction, and that helps prevent these types of risks. The second type of risk is strategic risk. And this is what drives your franchise to differentiate it and be better than the competition. These are the risks that you take from a business standpoint in order to succeed. In order to minimize strategic risk, you have systems in place to help you identify, evaluate, mitigate, and then when the bad events do happen, on how to contain that event. Your systems address each risk that's out there, not to necessarily get rid of it completely, because that's just not possible, but in order to minimize it so that you have greater chances for success. And the last type of general risk is external risk. These are risks that typically have no warning and that you have absolutely no control of, such as government regulations, change in government, environmental events, snow days, storm days with tornadoes, you name it, environmental events. External risks are also competition. You don't control what they do. And unfortunately, criminal behavior. There's also 4 bias traps. We're going to focus on the strategic type of risk and setting up systems so that you are at least aware of and evaluate what a certain decision within your business is going to do and what the risks are associated with it. Now, when you're setting up your systems, be aware of 4 bias traps when you're assessing risk. First of all, there's what I call the Superman syndrome. It's an overestimation of your personal span of control, an overestimation of your abilities, an overestimation of the abilities of your team are also involved in that. The second type of bias trap is range of possible outcomes is defined too narrowly. You don't look at, especially in protecting your business, the very worst case scenarios are dismissed and not taken into account. There's also confirmation bias. This comes into play when somebody is trying to use data to justify their decision. And the data is either manipulated in a certain way, or the person basically only relies on data that justifies their position. This also leads to groupthink. That's a problem where everybody agrees because the data they're being given isn't the complete picture. And lastly, there is results bias. Basically, what that means is ambiguous threats that may be out there that sometimes you can see them and sometimes you can't, whether it's a competitor, whether it's internally with a specific employee. Those warning signs are dismissed as false alarms. And the negative outcomes of that festering, that threat festering, because it's not addressed, those aren't considered. They're not taken into account until they actually occur, and a system is not in place to mitigate that. There are 3 steps you can take, and you could start doing it today, that will minimize the strategic risk that you take on an everyday basis in your business. Number 1 is education and professional development of your employees. It helps reduce the unknowns in their mind, gives them confidence in what they're doing. You're also able to then test new theories in controlled setting within your workplace. If you want to try new technology, we had 5 routes with Image First. I could try new technology with 1 because I knew that the drivers knew what they were doing and would test it to the best of their ability. It also, with education and professional development, it allows your employees increased awareness of what's going on around them and why it's going on, what the general purpose is of what they're doing. And in the end, that will help them become more effective. Another way to minimize the strategic risk is to never neglect your network. Always build your network. And for those that are already in your network, continue to foster the relationship. This network is a resource gold mine, whether it be for referrals or new customers, referrals for contractors that they trust, or just help directly from this person in your network. Personalize interactions so that one-time transactions become lifetime relationships. Never neglect your network. And then last is to practice these skills. Use the education and professional development and let your employees practice their skills so that they get better and gain confidence. One of the hardest things for a business leader and a franchise owner to do is to know when to seek help. You're not in this alone. And that's a very hard question to answer, but it's one that successful franchisees ask themselves over and over. And there you have the 3 actions you can start today to reduce the strategic risk in your franchise. Thank you for watching this episode of the Successful Franchisee's Beautiful View, and subscribe to the channel so you can get updates on new episodes. Until then, stay safe and win every day.